everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Rise Up, Ignite Your Life, Voices from the Frontline. And my name is Krista Fee, and I'll be your host today. And I have brought to you a special guest who is part of a movement. And I think that he is representative of one of the most underrated and most important pieces to the mental health and wellness puzzle for our military and first responders moving forward. So I would like to introduce to you Brian Hewes, and he is a husband and father of three, which I absolutely love that it was the first thing that he put in his bio, because so many of the people that I interview put their job titles first, and they put their identity as their job. And Brian immediately comes straight to who he is as a person, which is so awesome. So I'm sure he's going to have some really great things for us to talk about today. He is a first responder coach, specifically for law enforcement, and he spent over 18 years working in the field. So please welcome Brian Hewes. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Krista, I'm glad to be here.
It's nice to have you. I love bringing on people who are not used to the public platform as much and who, don't have 10 years of public speaking under their belt, because you're going to bring it to us raw and real and just straight from the heart. So I look forward to talking to you today. I always like to start by just finding out who you were as a child. What was your childhood like? What are those memories for you that come up first?
Yeah, so I had a really great childhood. I grew up in the Midwest in northwestern Indiana as a little kid. Great experiences with my mom and dad. They were super supportive of me. Kind of went through school and all that. I really was drawn to the law enforcement profession from a young age. So my dad's best friend when I was a little kid was a narcotics detective in the local police department. So I got to hear some stories and some different things that he did. So that really became my professional goal as I got older and kind of started thinking about different things I wanted to do. Ultimately, that became kind of like my big goal was I wanted to do what he did and become a narcotics detective.
So what did your dad do?
My dad's in business. He's retired now, so he's been retired for about a year and a half, but he was in automotive manufacturing management.
So you got both sides. You got the romanticized version of the excitement of the police department, and then you got to see the hard work and order of business professions.
It's one of those things, law enforcement, where you can read all you want, you can listen to all you want. You're still going to learn a lot when you get there yourself. But I did definitely get a look, behind the curtain from my dad's friend for sure.
What did you go into when you started your law enforcement career? What was your field and your interest?
Yeah, so the agency where I started, I'm in Central Virginia now. I work for an agency of about 700, mid-sized agency, and everybody starts out in patrol. So you go through the academy. The academy is, I think it was 32 weeks. Then you go into field training, which takes about 3 months, and then they throw you out there in patrol, and you have no idea what you're doing. And that's probably one of the scariest days of my life. My first day on my own. You get behind the wheel of your car and you start driving, and you're just praying that the next hot call that comes out is not close to you.
So how long was it for you before you had a call that kind of took you out of your comfort zone, that was like, oh my gosh, this is so much, and I feel like I shouldn't be here alone?
Yeah, so it didn't even take that long. My first call that really imprinted on me was my very first day in field training. So I finished the academy, went through that whole process, did the graduation, and a couple days later started my first shift with my field training officer, who was a stranger to me. And so we were riding around for about an hour. And if anybody's heard a police radio, until you get some time listening to it, you can't understand it at all. It's a lot very quick and a lot of jargon in there, and it's hard to know what's going on. But We had a tone come over the radio, and I was driving, and the dispatcher started talking really quickly, and I didn't know what they were saying. And my FTO told me to pull over, and he was going to jump in the driver's seat. So he did. And we start racing off down the road, lights and sirens. And so I'm trying to ask him what is going on. I have no idea. And he tells me it's a shooting call at a police officer's house. So we pull up, and this would have been in January of 2006, probably. We pull up in front of the house. We're the first ones there, and I could describe it for you like it just happened. But we're the first ones there. We get out of the car. We go up the driveway. The garage is open. There's a pickup truck in the garage. There's a woman crying. There's a child crying. And I remember seeing a one bullet hole in the rear window of the truck. And we pulled our guns out, and we took a quick peek inside the truck. And there was the police officer who had killed himself with his duty weapon. And he worked at our agency. That was a really tough thing to see for my very first call for service.
And you didn't know this person because you had just started, correct?
Absolutely. And I'm glad. I'm thankful for that. He wasn't an instructor or anything like that, so I had never interacted with him before.
But your coworker that you were with, what was their reaction?
Oh yeah, I mean it was surreal. People describe, in events of stress where time slows down. That's one of the few times in my life where I felt that. I felt like everything all around me became a blur, and it was like we were stuck in molasses, and things just moved so slowly. And of course, more people came and started doing all their things, and it's my first day, so I don't know anything. So I'm literally worthless standing there. And the call got taken care of. No thanks to me. But yeah, obviously it was just a really tough time for a lot of people.
As a new officer who hasn't really been conditioned, I'm choosing my words kind of carefully here, who hasn't really been conditioned to not have emotion, to not show any response, and to have that quirky sense of humor that only first responders are going to know and understand. It's kind of a if you know kind of conversation. What was that environment like for you?
Yeah. So I had some difficulty with that after the fact. I didn't particularly feel that bothered by it in the moment, besides kind of the outward expression of it. But what I realized later was the couple nights after that, I wasn't really sleeping very much, and I just kept replaying that over and over and over in my head. And one of the reasons why I think that stuck with me the way it did was as part of our academy training. We do what's called officer survival, and I'm sure it's different names for different agencies, but basically that's the block of instruction. It's about 3 weeks where you get thrown into a bunch of scenarios and you have to literally do the job. Now, it's in a training environment, but they try to make it as real as possible. Well, the very last scenario that we do is called the ambush scenario. And what that is the instructors, you don't know what you're doing. You're by yourself. They get you all hyped up. They start yelling at you. Then the radio tones and they say, you got to go to this place. And the place we did this at, it was like a mock little town type scenario. So you're supposed to go to this house on the edge of the town. And so you get in the car and the instructor's yelling at you to go faster. And just, it's information overload at that point. And you pull up to the house, and when you get out of your car, the instructor's literally physically pushing you into the scenario. Normally you wouldn't run into something you don't know what it is, but they're physically pushing you in. Your instincts are telling you not to, but you can't. And the scenario has people at nighttime on the outside of this house trying to draw you in. Hey, officer, we need help back here, etc. When you go back there, then the blank firearms fire goes off, and it's an ambush. And they just kind of want to see how you react. Well, the part of that was so tough for me was the layout of this suicide call was almost exactly the same. We were the first ones there. There was nobody pushing me into the scenario, but I felt that. I literally felt pushed up the driveway. And there's people there that are screaming. And I don't know. I can't tell you exactly why, but that just really stuck with me. And I kept replaying it in my head over and over and over. And it was at that point I realized, like, I've kind of got a problem here. I don't really know how to handle this.
So your training alone in its own way created a trauma imprint and created a little bit of trauma reactivity even before the job happened that gave you that trauma memory instantly.
I never thought of it like that. But yeah, I guess you're right. Like, you pair that with what happened in the real world and they just mesh together. And yeah, it was definitely a part of it.
That's extraordinary. So you spent almost an entire, like, 20 years is a full career, correct?
Yeah. So I'm still in. I'm 18 years right now, and yeah, I've been doing it the last 18 years.
So you're going to be a retiree we get to celebrate.
Yes.
So you now are doing coaching and training. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so it's really neat. So folks in law enforcement will know who the company Axon is. They make body cameras and tasers and things like that, and they make the best hardware in the business, I think. That's what my agency uses. And what they've done is some folks at Axon have kind of branched off and started their own company that's attached to Axon, but it's called Performance Protocol. And what it is it's providing a cadre of coaches, they call us, who are all former law enforcement or current law enforcement, to enter into one-on-one coaching relationships with current police officers, to give them some objective ears and some objective feedback to work through issues that they're dealing with. And I'm just getting started with it, but it's really powerful so far. And I definitely could look back and say I could have used that early on in my career.
Right. I think the model, the coaching model is so, so important as we progress forward in the mental health and wellness conversation for all military and first responders, because it's real easy to get stuck on the conversation around post-traumatic stress disorder as a diagnosis and a clinical issue that needs to be addressed by licensed therapists. But what we miss when we have the conversation in that way is that there's hundreds of thousands of people who require subclinical care and who could really benefit from those lower levels that are more accessible and less expensive and more real world applicable. And they're just so much more accessible. And there's not all of the different stigma and all of the different issues that are surrounding that diagnosis perspective. We're just talking about wellness, right? Then you're talking about performance and wellness and being the best that you can be and having the best career that you can have and the best family. So what's your take on the role of coaching in this future of mental health and wellness for our police departments?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I would never say that I have post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Like, I don't feel that that's applicable for me. But have I learned early on in my career, and I can touch on that a little bit later, found ways to attend to my health and wellness before it got to that point so I could kind of build insulation around myself so that didn't happen? Absolutely. And coaching is a big part of that. And, so I agree 100% with what you said. In law enforcement, and in my situation in particular, let me rewind back to the couple days after that incident where I was having a hard time sleeping and I realized I was not doing well with it. There was absolutely no organizational support or encouragement for me to talk to anybody. I did that all on my own. And in fact, it was really funny. But years later after that, people would find out that was me. I was the brand new guy on that scene. And a rumor went around at some point that officer had quit, like right after it happened. And of course I didn't quit. I'm still there. But people were amazed to find out that was me because, that level of care to the individual's mental health before it got too bad just didn't exist. There was no support for that. There was no acceptance of that. And there was people who criticized me. I ended up going and talking to someone that I trusted and told them the problems I was having. And they referred me to our mental health professionals. And I had one visit with a mental health professional. I talked everything through with her. And from that point forward, it was just like a light switch on and off. The switch was turned off and I was fine. And I've been fine ever since. So I'm really glad to hear and see and experience that, there is support and there's programs and systems in place for officers to work on their health and wellness before they have a problem, right? Before they're the one in that pickup truck holding their duty gun, things to help you conquer some of your little challenges so that they don't become big challenges.
Right. It's always challenging as we're having these conversations with medical professionals and administrators, and we're trying to demonstrate the value of looking at it from a preventative standpoint and from an ongoing standpoint, instead of looking at post-traumatic stress from a reactive standpoint, which is really what the government and all of these official conversations seem to be really focused on. How do we stop the problem after it already exists? How do we deal with it after it already exists? And we're missing all of the opportunity that exists to put into place all of these earlier strategies and to talk about it as stress reduction, because that's really what it is. It's traumatic stress, but it's still stress reduction and coping. So what is your favorite coping strategy that you learned early on that you still apply today?
Yeah. So that experience, that taught me that regardless of what other people say, if I need to talk about something, then that's what I'm going to do. And so I kind of developed that as a strategy from the very beginning. That's the only time I've ever had to talk to a professional about it. But that is something that I found, and you touched on it earlier, right? You talked about, first responders kind of having that dark sense of humor, or, kind of a way of using humor to cope with some stuff. And that really does honestly become an effective mechanism if you manage it properly, right? It can be used improperly for sure, especially depending on who's listening or watching. But just being comfortable talking about it, or coming on something like this and just being willing, hey, I'll talk about whatever if it'll help somebody know that it's okay. If something's bugging you or you're having a hard time with something, like, please talk to somebody. That's probably the most important thing you can do, because what you're going to learn is that it's not just you, everybody, especially in this line of work, doctors and nurses and police and military, and it's different to a degree, but there's a lot of similarities, and you're not the only one. And there's folks out there who will listen to you and help you and maybe have gone through the same things before.
And that's really important. One of the crisis intervention courses that I just recently took literally had a statistic, and I'm not going to remember exactly what the statistic was, but it was somewhere over 50% reduction in post-traumatic stress symptom occurrence in individuals that were properly debriefed. And when we talk about trauma debriefing, that doesn't have to be a formal debriefing. All that means is that you process the information after the fact. You took the time to talk about it or to communicate it in some way so that it wasn't stored in your body, so that you allowed it out of your body and you just allowed yourself to process it. So that debriefing process, in any way, shape, and form, whatever that looks like for you. Some people like to write, some people like to talk, some people do art, some people sing. Whatever it is for you, doing something to process what you've experienced with other people is crucial to reducing that post-traumatic stress outcome. So it sounds like, love that you're just a talker. You like to talk with people. Have you ever explored any of those more tactile, creative outlets?
So I am probably the least creative person you've ever met, for sure. no musical ability, no anything like that. So that would be awful if I were to do that. I find personally, I get a lot of, um, I guess, I process a lot of things by getting out into nature. That's kind of what I enjoy. So I do a lot of hiking, camping, and stuff like that. So maybe not quite the same in the creative realm, but that's just not who I am as a person. I just have to find kind of what works for me, and getting that. There's a real separation there from law enforcement work to being out in the woods. Right? There's no parallels at all, and that's kind of what's it for me. Is I really have to find a hard line and get past it and get away from it for a time.
It's where you get to be Brian, just Brian,
Right.
and not Officer Brian.
Yep, exactly.
I noticed it struck me that in your introduction, you actually put your roles as husband and father as your identifiers before you put your law enforcement career as your identifier. Did you do that intentionally?
Oh, 100%. That's and I don't even have to think about that. As a young guy, law enforcement, and I wasn't married and I had no kids when I started. It pulls you in, and it will take as much as you let it have. And so I, eat, slept, and breathed my job. Um, And so getting married and having kids, some guys never come out of that. And you see that in law enforcement. The divorce rate is through the roof. Poor coping mechanisms like drinking or whatever else, those become the way that people cope. And I have really strived to be very intentional about really having my priorities in order in my life. Well, my number one priority is my family. I don't care what else is going on. They're the most important thing to me. So my wife and my kids are always going to be number one. And that is how I identify. I do not identify as a police officer. That's what I do. But my identity is, of course, something bigger than that.
So, do you notice, since you're still in the industry, do you notice that is prominent? Can you recognize how people behave differently who think like you, and how people who identify as their role and the police department?
Yeah,
you can notice that.
Yeah, I think people like me frustrate people who live the job because they can't understand why my work cell phone stays in my work car on my days off. Sorry. If it's super important, you'll call my personal, but if not, I'll get to it when I get back to work. Um, and there are folks who just cannot understand that. They can't understand putting that above everything else. And I don't think they're wrong or it's bad. Maybe some people function better that way. I really can't say. But I knew that was something that I had to grow out of. That I found that I wasn't as healthy as I wanted to be, making that my number one priority. So I think people like me frustrate people like that, honestly, because there's things I just don't care about. But I'll say this: I think that having my priorities aligned the way that they are makes me a much better supervisor. So I'm a lieutenant. I supervise right now 18 people. Um, I think that makes me a much better caretaker for my folks, having that mentality, because little things don't get me upset, right? It's not worth getting mad about little dumb things. We can work through all that kind of stuff. And prioritizing the health and wellness of my people is always going to be more important than anything else. And so I've really found that it drives me in a better direction as a leader. Maybe not necessarily in the eyes of the agency. I can't say for sure. I don't know. But the most important thing to me when I'm at work is the care of my folks and their health and well-being.
Well, and statistically speaking, what will likely occur for you is your people will have a better outcome. Your people will have longer, happier, healthier careers. And your supervisors aren't going to notice that. People won't notice that until, we're looking at statistics and we can go, oh my gosh, look at this is a leader who's got it balanced in his department. This is a leader who has fewer suicides, who has fewer divorces, who has people who report a higher quality of life and a higher degree of satisfaction in their job. So you're probably not losing as many officers to other departments as some of your cohorts who are less able to see their employees or their coworkers as human.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's a hard thing to measure for sure, and there's a lot of variables there. And I'm certainly not the perfect supervisor. Don't get me wrong. There's people who would say I lean too far in that direction. I'm okay with that, and I'm comfortable with that, and I don't really care what other folks think. I do it the way that I think it should be done, with the most care that I can for my folks. My rule is, if I can say yes, I will. Because people know best how to care for themselves. It's not my job to decide how to best care for them. It's to let them do it, or give them the tools they need to be able to do it themselves. That's ultimately what it's about.
The job of law enforcement, everyone I ask why they do what they do, the answer is always because I wanted to help people, because I want to serve my community. So if we are able to keep that objective in mind, that they are there because they want to help people and because they want to serve their community, then I agree with you entirely that if that's truly their objective and that's where their hearts are leading, if we allow them the space to be human, they're going to do the best possible job every day that they can possibly do, because their hearts are in the right place. And your job is to give them the tools and resources to maximize their capacity to do that outcome, to provide that outcome, to serve others, to serve their communities. Do you feel like modern law enforcement as a organization is still committed and is still following that objective primarily, or do you struggle with some people in the organization who maybe have lost sight of that idea?
I think it's interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's hard for me to know, how other people look at it, right? I think we have unintentionally lost sight of that to varying degrees. That is something that is very important to me, that even as time has gone on, I've become more and more committed to. We're here as servants to the public. We need to be good stewards of the resources that we're given. I don't measure the success of my folks on tickets and arrests and things like that. I honestly don't care about those things. I can't say I don't care, but those are not my primary metrics. It's, how are they treating people? Are they serving people? Are they going, not necessarily above and beyond, but is that their mindset? And if not, how can we develop that in a real way? You can't just tell somebody, hey, you don't care enough about people. You need to care more about people. It's all about explaining the why. It's about looking for opportunities to say, hey, I saw you talking to that domestic violence victim on that call. I really like how you went out of your way to explain to them the process and what some of the resources are available for them, right? Yeah, you could have just given them the green sheet. I really like how you talked them through it. It's finding those times, because I think, and I could be wrong, I can't come close to speaking for, law enforcement.
Right.
But I think that unintentionally we have lost sight of what we're really here to do. And it gets caught up in, okay, we've got laws we have to enforce. We've got this, we've got that. And we really, honestly, yeah, I think we have lost sight of it. And that's something I've been fighting against. And I don't think anyone's fighting against me per se to say it's not, but organizational change is hard. And lots of times you have to just work within your sphere of influence.
Right. And there's so much external pressure, and so much, I don't even know what words to use here. The shifting perspectives of the community that are so fluid, and there's so much against officers in this moment, as far as public perception, that it will take a lot of that sensitivity. It will take a lot of that compassion and kindness to counteract some of this, whether it's intentional or not. The cell phone worlds where everyone's putting a 5-second clip that's out of context and shows an officer being abrupt or being gruff, or taking things to that level that they never want to take things. um, it's going to take a lot of effort on that side of compassion and understanding and connection. Have you felt that shift in perception, and how do you respond to that in your world?
Yeah, I think that's the way forward. I think that we have to kind of get back to our roots, so to speak, when we're looking at situations dealing with people. Um, we have got to be focused on doing the right thing, for lack of a better term, right? I think it's obvious. Everybody knows, don't steal the drug money on the search warrant, right? We don't need to go over that. Doing the right thing in that sense is common sense, and it's obvious. And there's people that violate that, but I don't think it's a lot. But where we really need to push our effort into is doing the right thing, as far as doing the right thing for people. What's going to make their life better? And again, it's hard to get a lot of momentum, even just on an agency scale. And again, I don't want to make it sound like, guys are just running around, whatever, out of control. Like, no. But do we focus on that as much as we should? I don't think so.
The flip side of that, so that I don't sound like I'm attacking police officers, because I absolutely never would do that. I am just recognizing social trends. The flip side of that is, how can we as a community on the outside, how can we expect officers not to become more reactive and not to become more aggressive when the behaviors that we present to them are violent and disrespectful? So if we're looking at trends like ambushes, and we're looking at trends like disrespect and lack of compliance, and um, all of these types of behaviors that we're also seeing online and on these videos, people are rolling up their windows when they're getting traffic stopped and saying, I don't have to give you my driver's license. How are we as a community supposed to expect our officers to be kind and polite and compassionate with us if our response to them is, we don't want you here, right?
Yeah.
So how do you address that with your people?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts on that. So first, I do a lot of instruction, whether it's in the academy or teaching new supervisors. I will highlight the word respect as much as I can. I've throughout my entire career, I've had very few problems with people. Have I been in fights with people? Sure. It's not much, and the reason why is I have learned that by treating people with respect, even people who, like you said, are start off by giving you a hard time or whatever, if you treat them with respect, I find that most people are not used to being treated with respect. And so their default is they're just automatically not going to give you any. But if you can just swallow your ego, and that's where I think law enforcement has a big problem in its ego. I think that that's an individual problem that could potentially be worked on in the larger scale, but it's ego. That's a human problem, right? People are very egocentric, but you really have to learn to let go of your ego and just be willing to treat someone with respect who maybe you don't feel like deserves it. I have had a ton of success in my career, even turning horrible, nasty situations into very positive ones by being willing to absorb some insults for a minute, create some rapport with somebody, explain to them what's going on, treat them with respect. You'd be amazed. In fact, funny story about that. When I was a patrol officer, I worked in one of the not greater areas in my jurisdiction. And back then, this would have been like 08 or 09, maybe. There was a lot of movement of officers based on who'd called out sick, et cetera, and so forth. So there was a guy who didn't normally work in our area, working in our area that day. And he worked in an area that had a completely different dynamic as far as the community and the police. And he maybe took some of that for granted. And so he got a loud party call of some guys playing music from their car in their front yard. And he pulled up to him, and he was a real jerk to him. He was just turn that music down or I'll come back and make you, or whatever. I don't know exactly what he said, but he was an idiot, and he left. And a buddy of mine and I who worked that area, we actually knew these guys, and they were two brothers, and one of them's dead now, and the other one I think is in jail. Not good guys. They're violent guys. But if you treated them with respect when they weren't slipping, they were going to treat you with respect. That's just the way it was. It was a rapport and a relationship you built with people where they were comfortable with you because they knew you weren't trying to do something crazy. It's, nope, I'm just driving through the area, or no, you've done something and now we need to address it. So we had to go back there and apologize to them and say, look, he doesn't normally work over here. Just don't let that kind of ruin what we have going on. You won't probably see him after today. So we had to repair that relationship because of how he acted. So respect is everything. I think we need to do a much better job of treating people with respect.
If you could change, we'll ask the magic wand question. If you could change one thing for the future of law enforcement, what would it be?
Oh, man, that is tough.
I know, right? I like to make you think too.
Well, you did it. I think the biggest change surrounding law enforcement probably needs to come from outside law enforcement. And that's, I would ask people to withhold their judgment until the facts are known. I think that is one of the biggest problems we have. And I hate to be that guy who kind of goes back to the easy, the low hanging fruit of how we're portrayed in the media. But I mean, it's comical how unfair and biased it is. And that makes it really difficult sometimes. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come up to me quoting stats they've heard on some news station about how I'm very likely to be a racist or how I want to kill them. And it's like, I've never even met you. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that kind of stuff starts us off on the wrong foot so many times, and sometimes in a very detrimental way that, that's nothing I can actually change, but I wish that was different.
Agreed. And just as a reminder, since we're on the statistics conversation, all y'all out there, statistics can be made to say anything that you want them to say. So one of the most valuable tools I learned getting a master's degree in college was exactly what all of our information is based on, exactly what all of these things we take for granted as facts, what those are founded on. Science is to be questioned. That's the whole purpose of it. So anything that you see may or may not be biased. Like, when I put a report out there that has statistics on it, it's going to say, I'm going to give you the information that says what I want it to say to you. And there is proof or evidence to back just about any claim that anybody wants to make. So just because you found a meme on Facebook that has a statistic on it that says something is something, the statistic might be technically true, but what it means is human interpretation. So you can say that such and such percentage of police officers are racist, but what is that found? What is that? What did they use to define it? What did they use to define what racism is? And how did they interpret whatever source of information they used to get that statistic? How did they interpret those results? Because those results may not mean what they say they mean. They interpreted it that way. So don't have so much faith in what you see statistically speaking. That's the only thing I paid $100,000 to learn was how to interpret information and how to realize that it's not really what we all think it is. So anything else that you would like to tell our audience that you think is extremely important as you have their attention for the next few minutes?
Oh man, wide open question there.
Wide open, anything you want to say.
Yeah, I would just say I have really found my pivot point for personal growth, for professional growth, came when I was willing to let go of my ego. Um, you know, in real quick story, I went up for promotion in 2016. I thought I was going to get it. Everyone else told me I was going to get it. Got really good feedback, did really well, didn't get it. I circled back around and tried to get some feedback as to why wasn't I selected, and ultimately it came down to people thought I was a jerk. That was the narrative about me, and I could have, at that point, I could have pushed back and gotten all upset, but I took that time for whatever reason. Um, and I reflected on self for a while, and I realized, okay, well, I'm not trying to be a jerk. So what am I doing that's created this perception, right? And what it was I was trying to hold everyone to what I thought were my standards, but I wasn't doing it in a way that was effective at all. And so I was having no influence. In fact, I was damaging my ability to have influence because of how I delivered feedback. It was really egotistical. I was very arrogant in how I did it. And so I decided at that point, and it's still a struggle for me. Don't get me wrong, but once I started that battle of letting go of my ego and really focusing on other people instead of myself, that I grew leaps and bounds, both in my personal life, right, as a husband, as a father, and anything else I do, and professionally, when I let go of that and started to focus on impacting other people. How could I continually improve myself and be constantly assessing my own performance? Because, if we're honest with ourselves, there's nothing we can ever do perfectly. There's always something you can do better. So if you're constantly looking to improve yourself, that keeps you humble, and it keeps you in a position to be able to have a great influence on other people.
And that is a really great segue, because some of you guys out there are going to be going, well, how do I let go of ego? How do I self-reflect? How do I do all these things? I want to tell you the number one best thing to answer those questions is get a really good coach to walk you through the tools and resources that will help you actually do that self-reflection, to actually sculpt and create the life that you want, and to become the person that can create that life that you envision for yourself. So, Brian, how can our folks get a hold of you if they would like to find out more about your organization or find out more about you?
Yeah, so I have a pretty minimal social media presence. So the only platform I'm on is LinkedIn, and it's just my name. You can search for me on there. And I would be happy to make contact with you. And if you were interested in moving forward with coaching, we could discuss that. Also, I would also consider looking at performance protocol through your agency. And so what the way that works is the agencies are purchasing the coaching credits to then be used by the individual to receive that one-on-one coaching. But you're totally right. I muddled through the whole process myself, and it was probably ugly to watch. If I had somebody who could give me that objective, mostly just ear, just to listen, would have probably helped me quite a bit. So I can't agree with you more on that. So yeah, LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm also a coach on performance protocol. Those are kind of the two main ways.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And it was such a pleasure. And we wish you the best of luck as you come to the end of your law enforcement career, and probably spend more time doing coaching, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And with your family.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a real honor to be on here.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for being here with us today at Rise Up, Ignite Your Life, Voices from the Frontlines. And I hope that you gained some valuable insights and knowledge from our guest, Brian. And don't forget that the Battle to Be Rise Up systems will be coming to your area shortly. And we have an app available now. So not only can you get access to your online courses, master classes, and one-on-one coaches, you will also be able to access a number of amazing outside sources that are now joining us as partners. So we will have finance We will have financial courses and master classes for you. We've just confirmed that. And we will have some other amazing leadership courses and coaches that are joining us and getting involved. So RiseUp Systems is your one-stop mental health and wellness platform for military and first responders and their families. And each of you in your profession has your very own app with all of your applicable stuff on it. So watch as we move out of beta and into your areas and can provide access to that for all of you. That's real world, science backed, totally applicable, completely designed by peers and mental health professionals together, and extremely affordable, and most importantly, 100% absolutely confidential. So you never have to worry about any stigma. You never have to worry about being made fun of, and addresses all of these phases from hire to retire and beyond of your health, wealth, and happiness. If you love our podcast and you would like to be on it, just message me at battle2be, BATTLE, the number 2, BE.org, or message us on our Facebook. You can message me on my personal Facebook, which is my name, as you see below, or Krista Fee, F as in Frank, EE, or our Battle to Be Facebook also. We're also on LinkedIn, so just connect. I would love to hear your stories. I would love to share your voice, and let's keep talking, because talking is what's going to change the status quo. We out here have the power to change the systems and structures that are tearing down frontline, the quality of frontline lives. So again, my name is Krista Fee. I can't wait to talk with you. Have a fantastic day.